God bless everybody. This is a Middle East update. Things are going terribly over there right now, and we all need to pray for everybody. There's so many people involved in this right now. You can't just pick groups, and tragedy is coming on to multiple different groups of people over here. I want to talk a little bit today about what's going on in Israel, and then I want to talk about a little bit potentially about how the markets might open on Tuesday because we have a long weekend. So as of now, it's a fairly live report on Fox News that now deaths are on the other side too. I'm just reporting on this side in this report just to give you an idea how these numbers are increasing. But it's indicating that 1,100 people have been killed and over 2,000 people have died just in the barrage from Hamas and that launch on southern Israel. But we've also had Hezbollah walk in this room also. And so we're having exchanges on the northern front between Golen Heights, West Bank, potentially Lebanon, as it's indicating here, and Gaza. And that's what I've been talking about. You have these multi-pronged attacks from different areas where Israel's normally set up as a dome against one area. They're not really set up for multiple attacks from three different areas from three different sides, in this case with one side being up against the sea, so they're getting attacked from the south, the east, and the north. And then possibly you might have the Yemen Houthis come into this picture also, along with proxies and groups from Syria and feed over from Iraq. And you just had a massive earthquake in Afghanistan that's decimated a portion of that country also. So all this area is being affected in general. So it's indicating that also, if you look at the article, that Iran and Hezbollah helped Hamas with this multi-front attack on Israel, and they were also talking about how the Revolutionary Guard had planned this weeks in advance. And so it's amazing that there was no reporting on any of this to the point where Israel was caught off guard so strongly in this attack. And we are moving into October 9th, where we're going to potentially see a retaliatory strike from Israel on all these proxies, and potentially a ground invasion, and potentially even an attack on Iran itself on hard targets, because they know this is not going to go away until they eliminate the problem. So I'm expecting to see a lot happening here. Now, one thing that I want you to realize is that all this Israeli nightmare is masking all the other reports out here right now, because that's all you're hearing about is Israel. Okay, Israel, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and all these groups. A lot is going on with Turkey here, and so when you go to the Syrian live maps and you actually look at the Kurds, you'll realize that Turkey is going off on them. And I mean, this is as bad as what's going on in Israel. No one's reporting this stuff. I mean, they're not attacking major cities, but the decimation of people here is extreme, and no one is paying attention to this. And look at the chatter and the reports coming out of here. Turkish minister is basically telling the United States that they need to abandon the work with the YPG and the PKK organizations in Syria, which are the Kurds. And so we need to understand that Turkey is pressuring the Kurds and the United States and all these different areas like Syria and Iraq, because he's literally bombing this whole northern front and literally doing reconnaissance to the point, and he's got all kinds of different outposts up here that he set up. All these are Turkish outposts over here. Okay, so if you see these little dots and you look at them, they're Turkish bases. Okay, so he's got a lot, and this is in Iraq over here, so you need to understand what's going on there. Another thing that I thought was really interesting, when you go into this prophecy of Daniel 8, one of the reasons Erdogan wants to control this Armenian area up here through Azerbaijan and Turkey over here is the Uli River comes down through here to the province of Elam, which is where the prophecy of Daniel 8 ends up in Shush, Iran. So it's interesting that all these areas are being affected, and that this is the actual beginning of the Uli River that comes down into this area of Elam, which would then be that prophecy when they pool between Baghdad and Shush down in this area, that Turkey would come down and smash them. So if you look at how Alexander did it before, I've been talking about this for a while. He'll come out of Turkey into Syria, into Lebanon, down to Tyre. And then what would happen? He skirts around Jerusalem because he can't break in the walls for up to 18 months. He ends up in Gaza and then in Egypt, comes back to Tyre, and then drives all the way over to Erbil. Why? Because this whole northern front's already being protected by Turkish artillery and forces. And so they're going to be squeezed into this funnel towards Erbil, and once Turkey comes down in here, the Kurds fall towards the east because they fail in the original attack, because they're going to do a counterattack. At least that's what happens in the past. I expect it will happen in the future, and I don't believe the Kurds are just going to stand around and let Turkey do all this. That they would end up in Baghdad and then into Shush. So what would happen is Turkey comes down, goes into Lebanon, goes into Israel, goes into Egypt, comes back to Tyre, which is here. They shoot over to Erbil. That all collapses down to Baghdad, and then ends up in Shush, just as it did back in the day of Alexander the Great. This will play out just exactly as it did back then, because God always shows us what's coming up before it happens, and he gives us examples in history to follow what his plan is. So when you look at all these things that are going on over here, no one's reporting on this, and they're looking at Israel or Russia or all these other places, especially Israel now, and that is extremely important. But they're missing this potential invasion that's going to happen with Turkey anytime soon. I've talked about those dates of September 18th. Actually, let's go back a couple days, because on September 16th or around the 18th, we saw those reports that Erdogan was threatening to leave the EU. Then we started getting into my paradigm between the September 8th and October 9th. That would lead you into a potential retaliatory strike, because Michael has been battling with Iran for 21 days, and then all of a sudden the heat goes forward. That day is on October 9th on my paradigm, which I'll show you in just a second. That leads up to a sieging actually in Jerusalem on December 22nd. So you can come out and look at my free site. It's endofdayssurvival.com. You come down a little ways, and click on this fourth PDF. That is the paradigm chart. You allow that to basically render. And then when you come into this area here, which is where we're at right now, okay, so this area right here is where we're going to blow this up real quick. And I want to show you why these dates are so important. And I've explained to everyone in other videos where and how I came up with these dates based on the prophets, and how certain kings of the past reflect certain kings of today, and that we can actually mirror those same things that happened in the past to what's going to happen in the future, because every one of these kings are in the same position in the same time that they were in the past, that are in the positions today. And so the king of Judah back in the day, which was Zedekiah and Jehoiakim, and the king of Babylon, which in that day was Iraq, today is Turkey, based on the statue of the feet of iron and clay. You have to look at the Ottoman Empire, which is the seventh kingdom. So we need to look at Turkey, because they are going to be the ones that bring back the Ottomans. And so when you get into that, you realize we need to be watching Turkey extremely close. But look at these dates. So I had come up with these dates in my paradigm. I had started them out with Gregorian calendar dates, because when you go into the Bible, it tells you on this certain day of the certain month of this certain king, a certain event was going to occur. And then once you change them to Hebrew calendar dates and convert them from Gregorian to Hebrew, you realize that they end up with these dates. And I showed you in a past video how I did that, and that way you could follow just how that works, because it's fairly complicated moving Gregorian to Jewish calendar dates. And what happened was I ended up with September 18th of 23 to October 9th of 23. And then the other date was really important, was December 22nd of 23. Now, these are important dates because right before this, Erdogan had threatened to leave the EU. Okay, like 2 days before this. And then all of a sudden, Daniel sickened for 21 days into the 9th because look what's going on out here. He's literally watching this going on. He's literally watching this in front of him. Israel is being attacked. Iran is launching this against them. He's watching this literally happen. He has no real control over this, but yet he is a magistrate. He's like third in command of, Iran, because he's been in captivity for 70 years and prophesied to 4 different kings, and now he's in Cyrus's kingdom. And he's seeing this play out. And so I keep looking at this October 9th date, okay? And then we have another date just shortly after that, which is October 14th of this month, which is a new moon. Yeah, it's a new moon, and you also have a ring of fire eclipse on this date. And so I keep looking at this gap between the 9th and the 14th, that potentially we would see an invasion, foot invasion by Israel into these areas that are being affected, West Bank, Golen Heights, Lebanon, and also Gaza, potentially Syria, and some of these other areas. But a physical attack on Iran itself in force, massive force, as well as a potential invasion by Turkey, all about the same time, okay? That would lead you up to a siege of December 22nd of 23 on Tent Tevet, which was the first original siege on Jerusalem back in 589, 588 BC during the Babylonian takeover and destruction of the first temple. He tells you these things for a reason. And what's really weird is when I did the 10th month of the 10th day of this one king, it ended up being this very specific date. And then when I realized what that date was, I ended up realizing it was Tent Tevet. Now, I've explained all that in past videos. It was a process. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. That took time, and God will show us things right before they happen. He doesn't leave you in the dark. I hate when they tell you that he won't tell you what's coming. God will never leave you in the dark. You may not listen to him. You may not see it. You may not have the seal of God, so you won't get it. But the people with the seal of God will get it. They will understand, and he's getting ready to show you what's coming because he's laid it out in front of you. Look, Daniel 8 has to happen first. Then Ezekiel 38 and 39. Why? Because Persia is the first country listed after the leader of Gog of Magog, which is in Turkey. And if you go to the older Bibles and realize Rosh is not in existence in any of the older Bibles, it's a mistranslation from chief prince in Hebrew to Rosh, which then ends up being Rasha, which has nothing to do with the Bible. You got to look at the statue. And I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. Look, if you cannot go back into the statue and the history of the Jews and you take this into Europe or other places, then you are misguided. And you are just wrong. Because God gives you extremely important details like the statue, the 7 kingdoms that lead up to the beast kingdom, the 3 beasts in 7, which end up being footprints, which turn out to be Alexander the Great or the Ottomans' footprint in the past, which affect the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, wow, the Kurds and Iran, and then Turkey at the end. That all this would end up being a reformation of the Ottoman Empire, which is what Erdogan wants to do by the end of 23. He's been telling this for 15 years he was going to do this, and now he's getting ready to leave the EU, and now he's getting ready to actually do an invasion. And the only thing that's holding him up is probably some F-16s and a few things. But even if that's the case, he's going to act as a humanitarian, and he's going to look like he's protecting his country, so he'll have the right to go down against these Kurds, which will end up being terrible for that whole region and Israel, because they'll end up actually attacking Israel with 10 full nations once Iran falls. So once they take Iran out and they end up in shush, guess what? They're going to drive back over to Israel. They're going to form all 10 nations, and they're going to sit on that doorstep, and they're going to attack it for 15 days, because it tells you they give them a power for an hour, which on the biblical calendar is 1,000 years of ours to 1 day of his. When you break that down, 1 hour of power is about 15 days on this planet. So you need to understand that. And as you walk into this December 22nd date, you have, because I believe, as I've said for some time, if you've been following me, I believe Erdogan is the white horseman. Okay, that's going to bring a quarter of the world into war. Right after he was unleashed on October 9th of 2019, you can go look up that date. It was on Yom Kippur. Wow, Yom Kippur wars. I'm telling you, Yom Kippur is massive. Day of Atonement. Right after that, those COVID reports started coming out from China. They had a shofar blast on, which said they were going to send the king of the north against this nation. And look, 2 years later, we are there. Right after this December 22nd date, you have a potential sixth seal event, because the sixth seal would break and kill Erdogan and all nations that go against him. And if you look at that terminology in the sixth seal, let's go do that real quick. So as he's breaking these seals, you end up in the sixth seal event, okay? I'm trying to get rid of some of this stuff on the front here. So when you get into 6:12, he says something really important. I want you to look at this terminology and look at what's going on here. And that's what I mean. If Erdogan starts to siege this city and you start to see this happen, you need to start getting prepared, because we're going to have a global nightmare called the sixth seal event, which shakes the whole planet. And he says, and behold, I opened the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as of blood. The stars from heaven fell to earth, even as fig trees cast down their untimely figs when she is shaken by a mighty wind. Now, I speculate, because he's destroying 10 nations, that he's literally sending surgical strikes from heaven down upon these armies that are attacking his nation. And what happens? A third of them die in plagues, a third of them die by Gog or the sword, and a third are then removed to the hidden place for the 1260 days, which is getting ready to come up in the trumpet phase, okay? And if you go to 8, 1, and 2, that's literal. 7 seals break first, half an hour of silence, selection 144,000 occur. Then you have that trumpet phase start, where he hands out the 7 trumpets. He tells you that, and it's a literal statement. Do not read much more into it other than what it says. The heavens will scroll back and depart like a scroll, and every mountain and island will be moved in their places. And so I keep talking about a chain of fire event. You're going to have an ash event, not necessarily nuclear. This is God shaking the world. You're going to see literally a ash cloud event. So growing things next year might be extremely hard when you don't have a lot of sun out. And also that would then affect the global planet temperatures, which would then put you in not a greenhouse effect, but almost a freeze effect, or a small winter effect, ice age type thing almost, where it can get really ugly if we get no sun penetration through this. And so that could be a real problem. I don't know exactly how that works. He's also talking about every man of all statue level will hide, because this is a terrible event. And he tells you that he hopes that they hope that mountains and rocks fall on them, because the wrath of the Lamb, or the Son, which is Jesus, I do not call the Father the Lamb. The Father is a totally different thing, and his wrath is in Revelation 15:1, which are the 7 bulls, and we're not appointed for that wrath. This wrath is the wrath of the Son, because his wrath will not come, or on that day his wrath will come, and he will destroy these 10 nations that go against him. And then what happens right after that? We have a vision between chapter 6 and 8, because what happens when you go to chapter 8, it goes right into the 7th seal. You have chapter 7, which is what? A vision of the elect of the 144,000 and what happens to them. So if you go to chapter 6, go to the bottom, that's the 6th seal. You move to chapter 8, you start where? On the 7th seal, okay? So if you cut that book out, you can keep going with a chronological book from 1 to actually 10:7. Then he has another vision to chapter 15, and so you cut those 4 books out, or 4 chapters out, 11 through 14, and guess what? You have a similar thing happening. He gives you a chronological book because it's a chronological order of event that's occurring here. So when you go to 10, I'll just show it to you just so you can see it. It's amazing that, actually, let's go to 10 real quick. I don't want to go 10:7. So when you come down to 10:7, though, that 7th angel, which began to sound but doesn't, he doesn't. He says, when the sound of the 7th trumpet happens, it's not happening right now, you will see this complete, or the next portion of the story. And then what does he do? He gives him a scroll and he eats it up, and then he prophesies against the nations and peoples for 4 chapters. When you come out of 15, what happens immediately? He hands out the 7 trumpets, okay, with the 7 last plagues. And then you see the rapture event right after that, because the Lord comes back on the last trumpet. It's that simple, the 7th trumpet. I heard that one today. When does he come back? What's the last trumpet mean? It's the 7th trumpet. It's the last trumpet. There's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, okay? So you need to understand that. Realize that he comes back on the 7th trumpet. Right after that, you have what? The grouping from Great Tribulation, and they give them harps and they sing songs of Moses and things like that, okay? It's not really that hard a book to understand. You have to cut out his 3 visions. There's 3 of them. The elect, one of the elect, one of which is chapter 7, one of the nations and people, which is chapter 11 through 14, and then he has a 3rd vision he's removed out in 17:1. I'll show you that real quick. Here, let's just go through this all real quick because it's that simple. So in 17:1, he immediately gives him another vision. Come up, look at this. And if you go to actually 16, what's really interesting, he tells you at the end of this that he's going to have a prophecy against Mystery Babylon. Right there. I'm going to show you what's going to happen about Mystery Babylon. That'll run for 3 chapters after this. When you come to 20, guess what? At the end of 16, we have Armageddon. The 3 frogs come out of the mouths. He throws 2 of them in the lake of fire. He binds Satan for 1,000 years. Guess what? When you come out of 20, because you're in a vision for 3 chapters, you go into 20, guess what? He hands out the bottomless pit. He binds Satan for 1,000 years. The millennial area happens, so you're in the millennial age now. You have the second Gog-Magog war. God destroys these people from fire from his hand, so they're never judged in the book of life. They never have the second death, and so this is a different war than Ezekiel 38 and 39 because they're buried in dirt. These people are actually consumed by God's hand by fire. Right here, the fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. They have no ability to bury these people. So do realize that. And then you go to the last portion of the book, which is 20 to 22, which shows you you tabernacling with God and all the beautiful treasures and things that you get at the end of the story. And that's where we're at right now. We're trying to get to that end of this story. We're in the birth pains and sorrows, getting ready to move into tribulation really quickly. So sorry to get off topic a little. I think those are extremely important things that we should be talking about. And if you start getting into all these different reports on this, you're going to realize that there is a lot going on the ground in Turkey and the Kurds right now. I mean, it's nonstop. Look at the reports coming out. And no one's talking about Turkey or the Kurds right now. Okay? I'm on the Kurds. Okay? This is all Kurdish activities in the last few hours or days. Look at the amount of activity that Turkey's throwing down on them. Okay? This is going to turn out bad. And he's telling us to get the hell out of the way. So maybe we will. Because right now we can't even hardly help Israel, and it clearly says that no country will help Israel as we move forward. So let's go look at the markets real quick review. So this is extremely important. This is going to be real quick. Brent has moved up massively since this attack. It's 5%. Markets won't up until Tuesday. I've talked about how this is going to be pushing 3-digit, 125 to 150 dollar oil. If Turkey gets into this game and they come through Syria and sideswipe everybody that's not paying attention to this, it's going to get insane on price. And this is your hyperinflation right here. Okay. Overnight, you've had a fuel jump 5%. So you need to go out and fill your vehicles and everything you can before they change the fuel prices and they bring the new tanks in to fill the undergrounds, because once that happens, they will change the price and you're going to see a massive spike in fuel as we move forward, because this isn't going to stop. You're watching this parabolically move up, okay? When you get into Bitcoin, I know right now it's somewhat stable, but you've now created a left shoulder head. You're moving into a right shoulder. If this completely forms and plays out like it probably will, and I've been talking about this for a while now, this is a year chart, so this takes time, that you're going to have a retracement of this from the neckline down. The gap would be between the top of here and here, which is about 7,000. And so if you're at 27,844, I keep talking, it could drop below 20,000 on Bitcoin. So just keep an eye on that. You've got a lot going on. You have, oh, also, there is no Speaker in the House, so they can't fund Israel right now. It's impossible because they can't pass legislation, and so there's a stalemate on how they're going to deal with that. They've even talked about reinstating McCarthy. That'd be a terrible idea. Maybe they just need to get somebody else in there. But right now, we cannot fund Israel because there is no ability, because we cannot pass legislation due to no Speaker on the House. When you get into the bond rates, let's look at this real quick. This has not spiked as much as the 10, which is a bad thing, actually, because the 10 controls all your loans. The banks borrow at the 2-year rate. That's over 5. That's bad to begin with. When you go into the 10-year bond, you are close to 5%, and look at the parabolic spiking going on in this bond rate. If it goes over 5, that is destruction of banks. That's destruction of loans, and that's destruction of a lot of things in your life. Cars, commercial, auto, air, homes, everything. You are going to start to see in double-digit numbers here on loans and things as we move forward, and they're going to restrict to the point where nobody can buy a house before long. So another thing I wanted to point out is there's this number that keeps popping up in my world right now, which is 1453. Everybody's like, what's 1453? Well, 1453 was the year that Constantinople, Turkey fell to the Ottomans, and that changed the whole dynamic of the Middle East and allowed Islam to penetrate into the European areas, because Constantinople, Turkey was the last real shield to Europe. And so when it fell, and that was the last stronghold of the Catholic or the Christians in that part of the area, that then allowed the Ottomans to basically go into control from 1453 to 1923 when they were destroyed in World War I. So why is 1453 important in this instance? Because if you go from the Feast of Trumpets on October 2nd, which is when I believe the rapture is going to happen. You can say whatever you want about that. It's a sabbatical Saturday when the last trumpet could sound on the Feast of Trumpets during the fall feast. The East Gate could be open on this time. And I know it's a 2-day event, so you don't really know, and you don't know the exact hour. I get it. I get it. I get it. If you work back from this date, 1,453 days, that ends on October 9th, which is tomorrow. And I think that's interesting because if that's the case, I've been talking about a massive event could happen on October 9th where we could see potentially not necessarily an invasion by Turkey. I think that could actually happen on October 14th or a little later because we have that Ring of Fire eclipse on the 14th, which is really interesting timing as we move into this next week or that weekend. But October 9th could be a literal attack in force or a massive attack on these proxies by Iran and Gaza and all these areas that are literally attacking Israel, because Jerusalem, Israel is going to have a response. They are going to have to do something. They want to show Iran and its proxies they mean business. And so what they're planning right now, they're going to unleash based on the amount of calculated damage that's occurred across their country is going to be a huge response. Not just a little response. This is going to be massive response to what just happened. But as Daniel tells us, Michael goes forward, doesn't necessarily work out so well, and then he brings in the Grecian army called Turkey to complete the job, and he tells you that in Daniel 10. You need to be watching Turkey. You need to be watching this stuff. You need to understand where you are in time, and you need to understand that these numbers are just going to accelerate on both sides. This is just starting. And on top of that, you have massive casualties on the Kurdish side right now through Turkey. They're not going to stand that forever. They're going to retaliate. You're going to see another bombing. You're going to see something else happen in Turkey, or an actual attack by the Kurds on Turkey, which is going to escalate that. And that's going to then come down into Syria, which is going to end up affecting Lebanon and Israel. And that's just going to create more of a mess and more hyperinflation, because when that happens, fuel is really going to spike. And you're going to see those massive 3-digit numbers. And then that's really going to send the pump prices up. And as we move into fall, and we have a massive slowdown. And even if you look at the job numbers, Jay's probably going to have to raise. They had a 330,000 print on jobs, which means he's not killing any jobs. That was one of his mandates, and he's not getting any of that done. You do realize, though, if you go into the numbers, that these jobs that were created were part-time jobs, and you realize that you lost a lot of full-time jobs, and people are basically getting more jobs to try to keep up with their hyperinflation, while Joey B's telling you that you're all in an awesome place right now, and we're going to have soft pillow landings as we move forward. God bless everybody. You got to keep an eye on this one. You keep an eye on Turkey. He's getting ready to move in. You keep an eye on Israel. They're getting ready to do a retaliatory strike on multiple locations and possibly even multiple countries. This one's going to get crazy. And we're moving our ships and stuff over there, but I'm not sure we're going to necessarily be in a factor. And we can't even fund the Israeli situation right now because we don't have a Speaker in the House in place to do so. So we're just a mess also as our economy's failing. And Joey B has removed all the strategic reserve out of our tanks, and there's nothing left, literally nothing left. And they can't buy fuels back at over $100 a barrel. So now they've legitimately put us in strategic harm if we're attacked by another country. And so we're in a mess here. And Tuesday could be a Black Swan event as the markets start to redigest all this from the weekend. I'm telling you, the markets could be ugly on Tuesday of this next week. or on the 10th. So be careful. Find Jesus, find the open door. If you have not got right with him, you need to. And if you're not prepping and putting stuff back for this one, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to do very well. He tells you to put oil in your lamp, and you've got, well, as of tomorrow, 1,453 days to rapture. Interesting timing, interesting numbers. Have a great night, folks. It's going to get crazy from now on, and things are going to ramp up. This is just starting.